Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe show, the home of epic conversations. And this is the place for epic conversations. And I'm the host of Epic Conversations, also the 2018 award winner of innovation, handed out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association. As always, I like to say you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. And I'd like to shout out already, yes, Dre is looking forward to this talk. And we also have Cho Nilla, who is a lady who's behind Black Canadian content creators. Cho Nilla. She's part of that organization. And for some strange reason, she wants to have me on this Sunday talking about building community. I don't know how to do that. So there you go. As always, when this lady is on, I am very blessed and honored to have her on. She has so many different perspectives and so many knowledge bombs to offer in a lot of great areas. But tonight, we're going to talk about an interesting conversation. And she brought it to my attention. Well, I knew about it, but she brought it to my attention further that this past week was the 30th anniversary of the World Wide Web. How many people knew that? But she wants to take the conversation even deeper, saying, well, let's talk about the evolution of the digital divide. So we are very blessed to have Dr. Tachi back on. What is going on, Dr. Tachi?
I'm great. How are you? And let me say happy Pi Day to you. In case you didn't know, today is Pi Day because it's 3/14 and pi is 3.14. So happy Pi Day.
Yes, happy P-I, not P-I-E, right?
P-I, yes. Now, although there are a lot of different businesses that gave deals off of pie and pizza because today is Pi Day.
So that's why I saw the tweet of yours about pizza.
Yeah.
I'm going, okay, trying to figure it out. Well, before we get into it, just give a quick introduction. I know some people may know you, but I know Chonilla does not, and she's in the same city as I, Toronto. So give a quick introduction to yourself, about yourself.
Okay, so my name is Tachi, or Dr. Chetachi Egwu. I go by Dr. Tachi, though, and I am a media professor, a filmmaker, media content producer, and a journalist. I host a couple of shows, which I will talk about afterwards, as Dr. Vibe will make me do, but I'm happy to be here to talk about this today.
This is good. I'm really looking forward to this conversation, and then Dre and Trinilla, if you want to jump in, feel free to. Yeah. And also there's people on Periscope. I'm sure they'll jump in because Tachi has a huge following, especially with her Periscope peeps. Like if she invites them, get ready for the onrush. So just be ready, folks. If I keep on shouting people who come on. 30 years.
Yeah.
30 years. And
30 years.
Someone was telling me before we went on live that the gentleman who discovered or invented this World Wide Web thing said recently, what it's turned out to be isn't what he had envisioned at the beginning.
No. So let's go back. I know yesterday on our conversation, I talked a little bit about it on the after show, but is it okay if I give a little bit of a precursor?
No. Absolutely. Let's go for it.
Okay. So for those of you that don't know, Tuesday was the actual 30th anniversary of the World Wide Web. Now, a lot of people use the term internet and World Wide Web or web interchangeably. They're not necessarily the same thing. The internet is the system of interconnected computers, so like this network that the World Wide Web lives on. So the World Wide Web is actually the hypertextual sound, music, images, pictures. That's not the internet per se. The internet is the network, but the World Wide Web is this colorful system that we see through a browser that we know today. And so that is what as I mentioned yesterday, the internet was actually invented in the 1960s. It started as a government military project by the Advanced Research Projects Agency. It was called ARPANET initially, and then it was used by researchers at universities to exchange information with each other. And that's the internet. It became known as the internet we have today. So in 1989, a British researcher who was at CERN, which is an agency on the French and Swiss border, was in the lab there. It's like a computer lab or a lab where they do some research in terms of technology. And he actually had this idea for a way to connect, you know, other researchers but being able to transmit papers and text and things that humans that we could understand, also pictures, because you weren't able to really do that with the internet. If you think about DOS, where you had all the text, that was really the internet, right? That was what it was. So
DOS.
Exactly, DOS. Tim Berners-Lee is the person that put the color into it, right? So he wanted to be able to transmit those types of things through this system of the internet. His boss was like, okay, this is interesting, this is nice, but it's kind of vague. So it wasn't until 1990, and initially it was called Mesh. So in 1990, he started doing more with it. Actually, oh, and who's asked you for search? See, these I'm going to have to turn you off. So I didn't even say the name of the system I'm using. So that's very scary. Okay. So in 1990, Tim Berners-Lee actually then came up with the idea or the name World Wide Web. So it was called Mesh initially, and then it became the World Wide Web. But what he pictured the World Wide Web being was a way for information to flow freely, something that would enable a development, something that would enable school children to find information, etc. So he saw it as this very democratic, open system with information for everyone. But you know, once you give things to humans, we kind of mess it up. So that brings us to where we are today. And Tim Berners-Lee is none too happy because he's pointing to the internet as, or the people behind the monetization, I should say, of the internet, as spreading misinformation. He's also pointing to things like net neutrality, which directly feeds into this whole concept of digital divide, and some other things that he's not too happy about. So he's committed to working to improve our net lives.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. Do you remember your first encounter with the World Wide Web at all?
I do.
Okay.
I do. So I'm actually one of the, I would say, fortunate ones where the school I went to, we always had computers. Again, the World Wide Web was not invented yet because it was 1989 that it was invented. But in the 80s, I was in elementary school. So I had access, my school had access to these things. So it wasn't widespread yet where people were taking computer classes, etc. on that level. But I was fortunate that I was able to do that. So I already had some exposure to the internet. So it wasn't until probably high school, because that was like 1990 when it was invented, that I was able to get some information about the web, the World Wide Web. But the thing is, at the time, it was very expensive. Remember, you were paying basically for how many minutes you used on this. Right. So this was like at the beginning of email, or mass email, I should say, and AOL and dial-up. and that type of thing. So that it was probably in high school that I had my first encounters with the World Wide Web, and actually then in college, where I actually used to know the computer language that was used to build web pages, hypertext markup language, which is HTML. So I used to know HTML very well, because that was really the only way before you had all these things now that you can build websites with it, just plug and play your stuff. You actually had to know coding and computer language to be able to do that. So I had very intimate knowledge because I learned HTML in college and built a couple of web pages. So I had, that's my experience with the web.
Okay, fantastic. Mm-hmm. So we're going to talk about the digital divide tonight. Even when you started using the World Wide Web, were you noticing a digital divide at that time?
There certainly was a divide. As to whether or not I noticed it, I don't think I paid a lot of attention to it, because again, this was new. there's always been a divide when it comes to technology, because generally the people who can afford the technology will have access to it, which inadvertently or advertently leaves people out of the equation because they can't afford the technology. So it wasn't just because of computers and internet and World Wide Web that a digital divide happened. There's always been a divide initially. And then what happens is that technology gets cheaper and cheaper the more of a mass medium it becomes. Because at one point, not everybody had telephones, right? At one point, not everybody had televisions. But at this point, we're basically at, well, in the landline age, there was like 100% saturation almost with telephones, and definitely 100% saturation point with TVs. So the gap closed fairly quickly. But now in this internet age, in the digital age, it seems like the gaps are not closing like they did before. It shouldn't take this long to reach the saturation point. And there are a lot of reasons for that. Beyond legislation like the net neutrality laws, also the fact that it's getting really expensive. Okay. So aside from, well, this is part of it, because when you think about how people access the internet, most people in the world are accessing the internet through mobile, not through a desktop, not through a laptop. It's mostly through mobile. Now, that used to be the cheaper option. But when you have phones, now this foldable phone from Samsung and all these other places, Huawei, and you're talking about upwards of $2,000 and more, that's a problem. That creates a bigger rift and a bigger divide.
Wow, divide. Okay, so let's get on to it. So, as a people, no, okay, are the same groups now being left out of the digital world place as there were back then? And I think when we talk about digital divide, not only users, but representation in the tech industry. I want you also speak to that also.
Can you repeat? You're asking me.
Okay, I'll ask you. Okay, so I want us to look tonight as we talk about the digital divide, not only from a user experience, but a representation.
Okay, so are we talking about representation in terms of the tech industries? This is what we're talking about now? Or
yeah, well, I want to get to that first. I want to stand the digital divide in regards to why do you feel there continues to be this digital divide, and is it widening or is it narrowing?
It's definitely widening. As I said, there are asinine things like the Ajit Pai and his foolish FCC cronies and the lobbyists that want to, for those of you that don't understand what net neutrality is, the net should be neutral. The way Tim Berners-Lee envisioned the World Wide Web was that it was open to everyone. But what happens is when you add capitalism into that, ultimately, there are a few companies that hold the fate of everything that happens on the web. So they can decide that those people that have more money and can get more access to certain things. So ultimately, ideally, they could block access to certain things based on how much you are able to pay. So they're creating these digital toll roads. So those people that can afford to pay the toll, they'll get more access to these things and everybody else cannot, which is the antithesis to what the World Wide Web is supposed to be. Okay, so that's one thing, one reason. Okay, things like net neutrality. Also, as I mentioned, the expense that's involved. Okay, that is on a personal level. When you have, again, the way that most people access the internet and the web right now is via mobile devices. So when you have mobile devices that, one, are getting increasingly expensive, and two, because they're coming out with updates and updates and updates, at some point, you're not going to be able to update what you have anymore. So perfect example, I have an iPad, I think it's the iPad 2.
Yep.
So I have an iPad 2. I got that in 2012. I didn't buy it. I got it because work gave it to us. So they gave all of the professors an iPad to use for, classroom research or whatever. Fine. Well, I tried, when was it? Last year to update.
I remember.
You remember. It's no longer updatable. So you're telling me now that in order for me to continue to use iPad technology, I now have to come out of my pocket with, even though they've got sales and deals going on now, and you could get the 9-inch one for about $250 on sale right now. That's neither here nor there. If I don't have $250 at the time, it's of no consequence. It doesn't matter. So there's also the constant updating, which in a way is for the better. It should be for the better, but it hurts those who have to rely on the older technology and now can't upgrade. And now I don't have access to certain apps. I don't have access to the speeds and the connection that I did before, because now you've updated it because of the system. So that's another thing, the constant increase in price of these things. So even though as things get invented and they become mass mediums or mass media, they get lower in price. For some things, that's not always the case. And then greed. Let's just call it out and call it what it is. Greed. Apple does not have to charge as much as they do for many of their products. I am not against making profit, but what I am against is fleecing. And so you do things like, okay, your products are wonderful, but now I have to buy a dongle in order for this to work. So even if I buy the main piece of technology that affords me the access to get on, because this is maybe a generation down, now you've changed the connection and I have to buy something else to make it work. So you see where this is starting to be problematic, Dr. Vibe. So those are just some of the reasons, but.
What role do companies like Facebook, Google have in the whole digital divide piece?
They have a role in the digital divide, certainly. So on the surface end of it, Facebook, Amazon, these type, they make hardware, don't they? They do. Even though, for example, Facebook's hardware I forgot the name of it, but the piece of hardware where you can talk basically, which is like the Amazon Echo Show. Can't remember, but it's like a home speaker. That's hardware for all intents and purposes. Something that is not necessary, but can enhance the experience. But because it is priced at a certain level, that always says that only certain people are going to be able to get it. That creates a divide. Again, I am not saying that there's anything wrong with monetizing things. If you create something, you should be paid for it. But then you also have to realize the effects that has. By creating this, you have then created this kind of effect. So yeah, on the simple level, these companies, many of them make hardware, so that's the thing. On the other level, when you're relying on technology, again, you're making things faster and faster and faster. And on their side, you don't have a choice sometimes, because as the system gets faster, as the internet gets faster, now we're getting ready to introduce mobile technology, 5G. That's a faster network. So any 3G thing that you have is not going to be able to last on a 5G network. So, in fairness to them, they kind of have to keep up because the system gets faster and faster, but you're part of that system. So then you also become part of the problem. Absolutely. And then, I mean, if you want to talk about what they're not doing, Facebook and all these places, if you want to talk about what they're not doing, what creates a divide also is when people that are underrepresented, whether it's people of color, whether it's women, whether it's people of lower socioeconomic statuses, when you don't have an avenue for them to enter these tech fields, that's also a divide, albeit a slightly different type of divide, but it's still part of the larger digital divide, where you have not only those end users that can't get in on the game because they can't afford it or nobody was thinking about them, but also now I can't even get into the top levels of these companies to help make a change because it's not open to me.
Old boys club.
Absolutely. And that's with everything, but tech in particular. There have been so many complaints about Silicon Valley, etc. When it comes to working with technology, about the lack of diversity that they have. This is not a new argument, but when you look at it in terms of the digital divide, it's huge. And one other big piece of it, as luck would have it, I just watched a documentary today that somebody sent to me. She didn't know I was doing this, but that was talking about digital divide and schools. And it really demonstrated how much well-funded school districts have an advantage over those that don't have the funding, because they're doing things like, okay, even if they have 25 laptops, they're sharing that laptop card. So as soon as they're done, wrap it up, because we have to roll it down to room 105 for them to use it. So it's not a thing of every student having access. It's this shared access. So you can make it tantamount to when you had to, back in the day, you're sharing books because you didn't have enough books for everyone. It's that same type of thing, which was unacceptable then, and it's unacceptable now.
Well said. Well said. Just want to check out on Periscope. We have Junior 6 watching, and we had earlier on new _MTV, also on the program.
Oh, hey.
Yeah, on the conversation here. So you deal with a lot of students, and do they ever are they obviously they're more adept at this digital world than we were when we were their age, correct?
Not necessarily.
Oh, okay.
Not necessarily. So I am Gen X, and the generation right underneath me are the millennials, obviously. So what I found in my teaching is, and this has to do with the characteristics of the different generations. Gen Xers tend to like to know how things work, want to understand how things tick. So that's why and that's partially because we had to. You had to understand how to hook up a printer to whatever your computer was, because that was the only way you were going to print things. Now we're living in a non-print world, which may be good environmentally, but that's just the world we live in. But we had to understand how to do these things. You had to get how to, all right, you got a computer without a sound card. Either take it to somebody who will overcharge you, or go buy a sound card from Egghead Computers and put it in yourself. So those are the things that we had to learn how to do, as Gen Xers. But the millennials, which is also Gen Y, they want to know, they don't want to know how it works. They just want it to work. So I want to push a button and I want it to work. And they haven't had to do those types of things. And this is a blanket statement. Not every Gen Xer is a tech person, and not every millennial is not a tech person. But this is just a general thing that has been found. The Center for Generational Kinetics, they have done these studies, and this is what they've found.
Okay, and so, hold on. I think Dre is coming in.
Oh, hey, Dre.
Looks like he is.
Hey, what's up, guys?
Yeah, here we go.
I really
hey, Dre.
Hey, how you guys doing? I agree with what you were saying. With the why and the how. X had the why and the how. Even in school, things shifted from programming and teaching to the Common Core and critical thinking, asking questions like why, how. So across all grade contents, that's been the recurring thing. And I also noticed that with my kids, my students, I teach 3rd grade, they really don't concern themselves with the why or the how. Just tell me what I need to know. The problem with that, or what added to that problem, is social media and how everybody is Googling things. And if somebody posts an article by Joe Smo Media and it says that President Obama had 3 baby mamas before he met Michelle Obama, they're sharing that all over the place, and it becomes canon. Everybody starts believing it, and they don't think critically or look to research. They just want to know. Even if it's wrong information, it's information, and they think that they just want to know it.
And see, that was the advantage that, those of us that are Gen X and above, whereas, okay, so I always had access to computers, but again, remember, there was an expense there and everything was not on there yet. So if you needed something, you still had to go to the library and research. So you were doing a fair amount of research to get the answer before you said anything. And then on top of it, it wasn't so instantaneous. We didn't have all the social media channels. Again, when we're talking about social media channels, we're only talking about the early 2000s. 2000s where they started to become a really big force. Maybe 99, they started to become a force, but that's what you're talking about in terms of masses of social media. So if they didn't spread like wildfire like they did now. So I agree. Absolutely, Dre. Absolutely.
Let me ask both of you, growing up, how much exposure did you have to computers?
Go ahead, Dre.
So me, I had exposure up until I was about 11 or 12. I had a Tandy.
Oh, wow.
I'm not sure if you remember. I had a Tandy.
From Radio Shack. Yeah. That was a Radio Shack, yeah.
Yep, I had a Tandy. And when Prodigy first came out, my godmother told my mother, get Prodigy so that they could email each other. So I had Prodigy. Yeah, a Tandy. Yeah.
Wow.
Age. And I was playing games like Carmen, Where in the World is Carmen San Diego, and
oh wow,
the game with the boxes, and then
Tetris.
No, not even Tetris, with the tennis thing.
Oh,
and we had a program that allowed us to play people who had internet. So I'm playing this bong game with people that are on the internet in different places. But it was slow. And you remember the dial-up tone?
Yeah.
The Prodigy?
Yes.
56.
Yes.
Yeah. So my mother had exposed me to computers pretty young. And I had experience with that pretty young. And for me, even then, I wanted to know how it worked. So my mother wouldn't let me open up the computer because my mother wasn't concerned with the how. She just
you better not break it. Yeah.
I think she's a boomer. I don't know. I think she's a boomer, but just don't break it. But I wanted to know the inner working. So when I finally got like my own money, I got me a Gateway computer. That's when the cow logo was big and it looked like a cow. And I opened that bad boy up. I remember spending like $1,500 for this computer, and I tore it up. I unscrewed it, opened it up. What was inside? What does this do? Yeah, it was a pretty interesting thing when to watch the progression. Even with Windows, how Windows had the progression of Windows 3.1, Windows 95, and then Windows 95 made it more user friendly. Like it was like wow, clouds. And I remember when it first came out, my friend had actually the graphics, everything was better. I had a Windows 3.1. My friend around the corner, Rudy, he had the Windows 95, and I would go over there just to go on his computer because of the new Windows, the new operating system.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So Dre, in that time, was it common for your friends and the people that you hung out with to have that technology?
No, it wasn't. They were more concerned about video games.
Right.
So they had the Nintendo. You know, it's still a computer system, but specifically only for video gaming. But they had like the Genesis and Nintendo's, PlayStation. Yeah, so they had that.
Can I make a comment about that? When I was in graduate school, I remember my professor, Dr. Hahn, was talking. We talked about the divide quite often. And one of the things he said is like, there definitely is a divide, but sometimes there's a divide that we add to, that we work at creating. So while the Nintendos and those types of things are much cheaper than a computer would have been back then, because you're talking, like you said, back then you couldn't get a computer for $400 like you can now. You're talking about $1,500, $2,000. But if you saved that money that you spent on Sega Genesis or whatever, and you didn't buy the Jordans and you didn't do those types of things, how much money would you have in order to add to getting this computer? So sometimes, while there is a divide, and by the way, the divide is not just about color or ethnicity or whatever. It's also about urban versus rural. There's a divide in terms of people who live in rural communities as well. They're still on the same copper wiring that they were from the early days. So there's a big need for fiber optics and things to get out to rural areas. That's another part of the conversation. But the point is that sometimes we make choices that don't allow us to participate fully in the digital age. And I'm guessing that's because we don't value that. We don't see the value in it as much. We don't see the long term.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Andre.
If I can also add to that divide, we have we'll talk a little bit about the racial divide of it, where people from urban communities, specifically low income communities, they had these video games, right? They had even now they have these computers, and they're being entertained by them, where people in more affluent communities where critical thinking is extremely encouraged, they're concerned with how did this work? Right. And that's probably one of the reasons why Silicon Valley is as undiverse as it is, because my friends were only concerned about playing video games growing up, or Jordans and stuff like that, as you mentioned. They weren't concerned about how to invent or create video games for people to make as they got older. So I mean, maybe I'm not sure. Maybe is that
nigger.
Hello.
I think Jason is trying.
What's up, nigger?
Yeah.
These monkeys talking.
I've blocked them.
All right.
Somebody with that's a waste of skin with nothing to do. Anyway, complete waste of skin. You're a waste, sir. Anyway, so
what do you think? Ahead. Do you think that that's probably one of the reasons why Silicon Valley is not as diverse as it is? Because because let's be honest, they were marketing video games to low income families and urban communities with commercials to play and have them entertained, but there was nothing really to help kids think about how are these games created. Maybe I can do the same thing.
3 things. A, when you say that they think critically or they were taught to think critically, yes and no, because critical thinking would tell them we need to have more diversity here. So they're not using the critical thinking skills that they should. So that's one thing. 2, I think that when you don't see yourself as part of the equation, how often do you see people because of the lack of diversity, you're not seeing that. When you don't see something, you don't think that's something you can be. You know this as an educator. That's why representation is critical. So I think it's cyclical, because of the lack of representation, that's not something that they think they can be. And 3rd, we already have a consumer culture. So in order for capitalism to work, there has to be consumers. So they have cultivated consumers so well in our community that we don't think about being the creators. And the funny thing is that we used to be primarily the creative community, and now we've become the consuming community. So I think those 3 things add to that.
Well, I just want to say hello to a number of people who have jumped in the last few minutes. We've got Steph, we got Joseph, we've got Melvin, we got Big Bad Brad, and we have 2 guests. Who they are. But I also want to add too in this end about the lack of the digital divide. And okay, actually, let me go back. Steph says the barrier to entry into software engineering is complex or hardware engineering. So she's saying there's so many barriers for those who don't have either income, because it's not a cheap field to get into either. So there's a digital divide created in not only in the creation of the product, but also in the user. There's a divide also.
No, absolutely. That is huge. That's huge. But here's the thing. One thing that we need to stop doing, we understand what the issues are, and we understand why this divide exists. We also understand that there are some people that are not interested in closing this divide at all. So we have to care more than other people. We have to care about ourselves more than other people do, because nobody is going to do that. So for the people that live in, and it's hard, it's not a simple thing, particularly when you talk about school systems, but on the individual level, okay, what are some things that we can do? And I know this will probably come when we talk about solutions for that, but we have to be solutions based and solutions thinking. We already know the problems. We have conferences every day about the problems that exist in these communities. And in this case, when I say community, I'm talking about the unconnected or underconnected. So I think the thing now is that we have to work towards how do we do this? Okay, there are several HBCUs that have engineering and science and technology programs and architecture, etc. We need to hook up with them in terms of this. And a lot of them are already doing things. I was in a program when I was in high school that was a science and technology enrichment program at the University of Buffalo. That was free. All you had to do is apply. Sometimes we're not doing the work. Let's be real. Let's be real. There is a divide. It's not our fault. But they're not going to feel beholden. A lot of people won't feel beholden to taking us out of this. So sometimes we have to do the work. We could sit and complain, or we could do the work. So I'm looking at it from both ends. The fact that something needs to be done by the people who created this rift, but probably that's not going to happen. So we need to do it ourselves, and we need to not complain about it. And it's not an easy thing to do. Believe me, I know. And I know there are very real barriers. But we've been saying this same song or singing this same song for donkey's years. I'm tired of singing the song.
So Tachi, earlier on, you said that you feel the divide's getting wider.
Absolutely.
But one would say more people have access to the World Wide Web. So why do you say, where's the divide getting wider?
The divide is getting wider. So more people, okay, here's a statistic. 50% of people have access to the World Wide Web, worldwide. Half of people. That's not enough. And I haven't looked, but I can venture to say that those 50% are going to be in the more, quote, industrialized countries. So when we look at this, we need to stop looking at it from only a North American perspective. This is a global thing where we're talking about most of the world is not living in a highly industrialized country. Okay, most of the world is not. So this is a global issue. So yeah, it's not enough. 50% of people that can access the web, that's not enough. It's not enough because that leaves the other half of the world unconnected and therefore unable to sometimes get access to things, because those who have the access, he and she who has the access actually has the opportunity. It's all about access.
True. Just a message out here. If anyone would like to come into the room, just message me, because a few minutes ago we had, as Tachi said, a wasted skin come in. So I've locked the seats. But if anyone wants to come in, just message me. And that's fine. Drake, come on in. Anything else you want to add on to what Tachi's been saying?
No, I'm just letting her rock and just listening. Because she very deep stuff and very true. But I did want to say, do you think that governments have a say in that though? Because there's some places in the world where the government really control access to who gets it and what content is being shared to the people in that. And I never knew that. I thought the web was like we can post anywhere and we can post on it, and anyone in the world, as long as they have the access to that link, can see it. I didn't realize that regions can control what's being shared. There's different laws about what can be shared and what can be uploaded. Like, it's crazy.
Absolutely. Russia is going through this now.
I'm listening.
I'm sorry. Russia is going through this now, actually, where Russian people are complaining about things like access, and they're saying that they need to control it because of the possibility of people infiltrating Russian politics. Isn't that a hoot? But that's what they're saying. And so that's why they have such strict controls. If you look at countries like Cuba, that's also the same case. This has happened in a sense in is it Kenya? Kenya, I believe, was where this was happening, where they were going to charge there's an internet tax. Okay. So if you want to get on the internet, you have to pay this fee or this toll kind of. And in doing that, in putting a toll there, that's also taking the voice of the people as well. That's another method of control. So there are different methods of, you're absolutely right. There are governments that do control access to the internet. And what you can see, China is another example of this. Why do you think that there are such strict regulations on things? If you look in some different countries, Facebook and all these other players have to go through rigors to make sure that what they put out there is in line with what the government wants, because these are the types of governments generally are repressive regimes and don't want negative things said about them. And so they try to control what is said through the internet.
Yeah, it's really interesting how much governments do control in the whole pipeline, because the organizations that control the distribution are the real people that have the power. Mm-hmm. And I think a little while back, Social Steph mentioned China. And in China, I think, and I heard the other day, is China creating their own so like own version of the World Wide Web?
Yeah, that's what, and I don't think it's just China. There are other countries that have looked at this as well to make their own. Basically, what that is like an intranet. So kind of like how you have a network, a private network. There are a lot of companies that have their own private network. So it's an internet system or a web system, but it's private within that company. So this is what entity like China is trying to do, and some other countries, because that way then they can control the narrative, they can control the discourse and what is being shared via these different sites on their own intranet.
Makes sense. Got a pile of people that have joined us just a little bit. Bobby, the Elephant Room, Cliff, and is that C. Will? Long time, C. Will. Long time, man. That's going back in the day. Again, if anyone would like to join into the room, please message me. We've had some unsavory characters try to get in, and they have been blocked. So please just message me, and we can make things happen. With the digital divide now, you're still saying one exists, even though lots of people have access. Why do you feel it still exists?
Well, yeah, I mean, it still exists. As I said, this is a global thing. So lots of people have access, but not everybody. Again, if you look at it from a global perspective, 50% is only half of the world's population that can possibly have access to it. That's not anything to write home about. You know, if you get a 50% on your test, you did mediocrely. Which is not a word, but I'm making it one. So you did mediocrely. So that is mediocre. That is a mediocre score if only about 50% of the world is on now. So even though it seems, especially when we're looking at it from the perspective of a US, maybe the perspective of a Canada, the perspective of Europe, maybe it seems like there are a lot of people. So let's just, for example, look at the US. So yeah, there are access points. There are a lot of people that have access, but let's talk about schools now. Again, there are, in this film, especially that I watched, there are students that they have access during the day. Is this the same guy?
Yeah, what's up, nigger?
And how did he get in?
Okay. All right. He's gone too.
Yeah.
All right.
Waste of skin with nothing to do anyway.
Yes. So what we're going to do, basically, the only people who can come into the room, if you have a picture, I'll let you in. If you don't have a picture, you're not coming in. Go further.
Yeah, we don't have time for cowards.
Exactly. But continue further.
Yes. So what we're talking about, the actual divide part of it, if you look at it from the school's aspect. So even if they have access at school, which for many school districts is very limited, there are some people that will still then have to go home and need to do assignments that are web-based and can't do it because they don't have internet access at home. That's a huge thing. Internet, if you think about the cost, I pay on the cheap end about $40 a month for my internet. For some people, that is not something that is affordable, and that is cheap. And so then you look at some other people with their high-speed internet and how much they're actually paying. So when you look at it from an economics perspective, for some people, it's not economical to add that to their monthly bills. And so they simply don't have access. There are a lot of people that, okay, even if you have a phone, right? They may not have an unlimited data plan, which allows them to get on the web and surf and do things. So back to the schools, you have some students who have access, they get the assignments and things, but they're not able to do it because they don't have access at home. That to me is not, in my opinion, a lot of people that have access. So there are let's say this, there are levels of access. So you may have access at work, you may have access in your schools, but then you come home and you don't have access. So that access is not really yours per se. You don't have 24-hour access or access at will. There are people that have that, and those people that have that obviously are more moneyed. But then you have that whole segment of the population that only has access at certain times or not at all.
Excellent. Excellent. And you make a very good point that some people have more access in a workplace than they do at their own home.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you know what? Here's the thing. There are some people that are okay with not being connected. I think that we have to delineate choice, the people who choose not to have all, because there are some people who want to be off the grid, and that's fine. But for the people who need this, look at how many people use the internet, not only for work, but for their businesses. Especially if you have a business, there's no way you cannot be connected, because you have to, the internet and the web allows you to reach so many more people. As with mobile technology and apps, it allows you to reach so many more people. But, it's just really interesting that this is not something that, there are a lot of pressing problems that we have, but I think this is something that is a huge problem. And I've seen that because I've done research on the internet since I entered into grad school. So this has always been my area of research. I've always looked at this divide thing, always been interested in it. And while there have been changes, there hasn't been any big sweeping. The one change that I would say is the fact that mobile technology became more salient and you could actually use your mobile phone to get on the web. But now that it's very expensive in terms of having a data plan, and the phones themselves are getting expensive, and because the systems keep improving, you can't use older devices to access very efficiently. This is what makes the divide widen again. So even if we gain a little bit of headway, when technology gets better, it makes it widen again. Unless there's some interference, somebody interferes.
Good stuff. A lot of say shout out to Leah. Thanks for jumping on. And everyone that's on the Get Vocal platform, I know who you are. So please feel free to jump in. I know who you are. And I think I've done a few blocks on a certain individual right now. So if I see him come back in, he will be blocked automatically. So if anyone has any questions or wants to jump in and just give their comments on a digital divide, please jump on in. And it's funny because most of us here on this platform right now, we have pretty good internet access, but there are many who still don't. And, and you mentioned about rural areas. That's really interesting there, the lack of access in rural areas. And our government's willing to provide that access to democratize at least access. What do you think?
It's expensive, and everybody will argue that the money is not there to do that. And so there are different levels to the whole thing. So as I started to mention before, we are on a system of copper wires, and the copper wires was what allowed telephony to be a big thing in North America, in this country. I mean, for most people, you're still using copper wire, but that's an antiquated system. So the system that we use now, that we should be using, which is not everywhere, is fiber optics. Some people call it Fios or whatever. And fiber optic cable, cabling, is thin pieces of glass that are stretched out, and then laser light signals are sent through them. That's how the signals are sent back and forth. So, but on one end of the cables, you have to have a transmitter. On the other end, you have to have a receiver. So there are a lot of things. And then you have to dig underground to bury the cable. So there's a whole process. You can't just say fiber optics for everyone, there's a whole process to it. And so now you're talking about upending the system of copper wires that we have, which the middle of the country, which is very rural, is all copper wiring. So you have to get people, governments, localities, municipalities that are invested enough in that to say, all right, this is what we're going to do, and those things generally all, need to be voted on sometimes. Sometimes that's not in the people's interest to think about that. They don't think about that. So going back to the technology of it, the reason fiber optics is so much more efficient is because glass can be stretched so much further or farther, many, many times thinner than copper wire can. Eventually copper wire breaks, but eventually, if you've ever, gone to a glass blowing class and you've seen them blow, and when you heat it, it stretches on forever. That's basically those glass cables. So, and because you can stretch them so thin, you could put so many more wires inside a bundle, which means a faster, better signal. But all of this costs money. And I guess the operative question is, who is going to pay for this? Who's interested in paying for it? But,
right.
That's an infrastructure thing. If you ask me, that is the money that you have to put into infrastructure if you want to compete on a world scale. So you just have to find that money to do it. I'm sure there's money, that you could take out of other things as a city or whatever to work on that, because it is important.
I see there's questions here by C. Will and the Elephant Room. Gentlemen, if you are okay, come on and ask them in person if you want. I'll give you a few seconds. They're always more effective if you come on the screen, if you're camera ready and you're not shy. And I know neither one of you are shy, but I'll give a second. If I don't see you coming on in the next few seconds, I'll give both questions live. But I'd like to see if you could come on and ask them if you can. But the first thing here, I see C. Will asking, all right, Elephant Room is coming in. Good stuff.
Yay. Hey,
how's
Hey,
it
Boogie,
going
what's
tonight?
up?
Hey, how's it
Outstanding.
going,
How
guys?
about you?
we're good.
Good. Awesome
What's your
conversation thus
question?
far. Yes. So my question is, communities that don't have access to fast internet, are they able to? How are they able to create their own web, amongst themselves? Is that possible? Just as how 30 years ago, the man that created the web, he using that same mindset and idea, is a group of, let's say, a small town able to recreate their own web?
Absolutely. If you are, so that would be like what I was talking about, like more of an intranet. You can create that, but it takes money. It absolutely, takes the funding to be able to do that. So if they decided, all right, well, not so much, I don't think you mean so much as create your own separate system, right? You're talking about doing it themselves so that they can connect, or
much more so, let's say the network, for example. Let's say I'm in a remote place in Ghana, West Africa.
right.
And you know what? I want to be able to connect now within this village, and I want to create a network that's independent from, I guess, what we all share here. Is that even possible? Or
it is possible. Yeah, that would. So that's exactly it. The same way that companies have their own internal internet called an intranet to communicate with each other, and then the ones that they deem that they want to communicate with is the same thing that you could do. For example, for villages in Africa, those types of things. And here's the thing: I think that African countries are the best place to try and implement, whether it's a separate system of their own or to start to become more connected, because that infrastructure is not there already. So it's not like digging up old even though they have a telephony system and it's copper wiring, it's not to the extent like the United States. So it's basically ripe for the picking, especially when we're talking about rural villages. They could do those types of things. So, and again, in that case, it wouldn't necessarily be the thing of every family or everyone, having a computer. There could be a centralized place, like the internet cafe, of course, is very popular in Africa. So they could do things like put fiber optic technology underground, and then have that go to a central place that everyone could use, and people from the villages could go there. That would be cheaper than every house being, having access to that, because they're not going to be able to afford that, but they may be able to afford a central place that this fiber optic technology can go to. And I would love to see that, because as you know, I'm African, I'm Nigerian, so I would love to see that.
No, that's amazing, because I guess to just further add, then I get because I have a very hard time understanding like the web itself as it is. So that means that a village like that, starting off brand new, would it be almost somewhat of a like competition to the web as we know it here in North America? Would it be completely separate, or it still somehow would have to connect itself to the web as we know it here in North America? Like how does that work?
That's a good question. So it's not that I'm a huge know all the technology, all the bells and whistles. What I do know that is if you have your own separate intranet, you could choose to or not to connect to the larger system. In my opinion, I think it's more beneficial if they are able to connect to a larger system, because that means connections with universities around the world. That means access to medical technology around the world. So I think shutting yourself off is not necessarily the way to do it. So, for example, this is, as we were talking about, this is what countries like China and Russia, etc., are trying to do. And not that you can't do it, you are free to do whatever you like, but is it beneficial when you live in a world with other people to pretend that they don't exist?
That makes sense. No, thank you so much. That was
absolutely.
All right, guys. I'll be watching from the key play.
All right, take care, Boogie.
Cheers.
Also, C. Will, he didn't come on, but he had a question.
Okay.
Aren't some cities trying to give free Wi-Fi city-wise, and then Joint Specialist jumped in and said city Wi-Fi is being thwarted by the big ISPs?
Yeah. So whenever there is money to be made, and there is a lot of money to be made in the internet game, in the worldwide, in the internet service providers game, the ISPs, there's a lot of money to be made. So, you would like to think positively and think that would not be a problem, but it is a real issue. So if there are people that are trying to offer it for free, this has happened before, where I believe it was Bill Gates wanted to be able to offer it for free. And there was such a big uproar by the ISPs, etc., because again, that's cutting into their bottom line. It's the same thing when you talk about sustainable energy and renewable energy sources to big oil. They're not going to like that, because that cuts into their bottom line, or to coal. That cuts into their bottom line. Same thing with the ISPs. If you talk about giving people internet for free, which is completely possible, it's not a good conversation. So yeah, I believe that, and I don't know which municipalities were thinking about doing it, but there are always lobbyists that come and say something against it so that it doesn't happen. And people could say that's not true. It is. It absolutely is.
Hey, that's definitely true. I lived in the city of Tempe, Arizona for a little while, and one of these ISPs, community or city-based Wi-Fi, and it almost came online, but then it didn't go anywhere. And then found out that the local cable company and didn't want it to happen, because they paid for these right-of-ways to install the fiber and the copper to service these communities. And so it creates, and it's in these contracts with the cities that they're the only ones who get to do it. They're the only ones who are allowed. So we really got to fight to get these, show up at your local meetings and cities and say, we need to change these laws so that these giant ISPs can't dictate how we get information in our community.
That is so true. Well said, because we don't pay attention. First of all, the only time we care about politics or vote usually is when it comes to a huge presidential election. But we forget about all the other little elections, and then we forget about our local elections and then local city council meetings. That's where they talk about these things, because they know good and damn well none of us are going to come and sit. Same thing with school board. We don't go.
Exactly. And that's where they get the railroad.
Exactly. So it's on us as well. You know, we can blame them, but it's also on us, because if they put it out there for information and we're not in the room to receive it, whose fault is that? It's ours.
Right. And I had another couple points that along the ISPs and the digital divide is that these companies like Verizon, and talk about the landline one, you know, and your local providers, they're cutting the copper. Like, they're installing your new voice over IP phone system, and then they're cutting the copper, so you can't even get an old school phone line anymore. And that's actually going to creating a lot of problems with emergency services, because they can't always get the right information on these new systems. And I'm like, want to promote this idea that we need to keep the copper and actually make a whole new network, or not a new network, but keep the old network alive. And actually we can put some digital layers over that old, like, analog network to provide some low bandwidth solutions for people, but also provide emergency services, so they can pick up a phone, without a battery or anything, pick up a phone and get that dial tone and dial 911 is so important, because with these new digital systems, the power goes down, your battery runs out, you can't get service, and then it's all overloaded because the cell phone network's not working because it's overloaded, and it's gonna, like, this is gonna become a really big issue soon, especially in disaster areas and stuff, with the elderly who only have a landline.
That's another divide, Dr. Vibe. That's another end of the divide. So, you know, we're talking about rural areas, we're talking about urban underprivileged areas, but then, you know, also talking about the elderly, where the learning curve is larger for them to understand some of it, and they don't feel like it. So they're going to stick with their traditional copper wired landline rotary phones.
Right. But they come in for service, and the guy comes in to do their their TV, and then they're like, oh, we're going to upgrade you to this new digital telephone system, you're going to love it. And then they don't love it, and it sucks, and then they can't even call 911 when they really need
exactly.
Welcome to you, Will.
Hey, Dr. Vibe.
Hey,
might like this one out there.
How are you?
I'm doing great. Good to see you guys again.
You
Good to see you right back. What do you want to chat about?
So I'm studying a lot of online marketing and different things like that, and in regards to this conversation about how the digital divide separates people from a lot of economic opportunity. You know, I mean, we have so much more access now to do things that weren't even possible for the common person, you know, as far as access to audiences and whatnot in markets. And you have to be online to get that, you know, as far as like Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. These are like the new networks, you know, like NBC and used to be. But now everyone has access to it as long as you have access to the internet. So that's an economic, I guess, divide that is impeded by that is exacerbated by the digital divide. Would you agree with that?
Oh my gosh. Dr. Vibe, this room is so smart and on fire tonight. Absolutely. That's another end of the divide. So, you know, when we talk about the digital divide, there are many different divides within the larger one. You just brought up a really great one, that whole economic divide. If you, for example, to take advantage of this e-commerce game, you can't do it if you're not on E. You know, you can't, you just simply can't do it. So that is a huge concern. It's a real concern. And you think about people, okay, this is a real concern. Think about people that have formerly been incarcerated and they've paid their debt to society and they come out as you know, it's extremely hard to get a traditional job somewhere once you've been incarcerated. But one thing that you could possibly do is to start a business. But if you don't have the means to start that business, like an e-commerce business, it's extremely difficult. So that separates you from opportunity. Absolutely. The one place that you could probably get on is very difficult for you to do because of the cost of the internet service provider, because of the cost of the device itself, etc. So there's so much there, so much there that people with means don't have to think about and don't think about on a daily basis. So spot on, sir. Spot on.
Good point. Good point.
Yeah, I was seeing well, just a possible solution. So a lot of cities and municipalities now, you can get a smartphone for with a government program like SafeLink, or there's another one I forgot the name, Assurance or something. And so at first you couldn't get a smartphone. It would just be some cheesy, phone that only dialed numbers. But now you're able to get a smartphone. And I think it's because they want you hooked into the grid somehow. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, it's a benefit for them, but it's a benefit for, like you say, the common person who can't afford those things. And I made a comment earlier about the other good thing that's trying to trend is Wi-Fi, like free Wi-Fi access. So when I was in Boston, I noticed they did have an initiative to try to get it cross city-wide. And I agree with the last guest that there probably are a lot of forces that are pushing against that. But it's just a trend, especially when you have so many like coffee shops and libraries and different places that have free Wi-Fi, Burger King, wherever you go, it's slowly starting to trickle out, and I just looked it up online while we were talking. Boston is still trying to do that. So like, Boston Commons, big common spaces, because you were mentioning how in Africa, that could be African countries, that could be something they can do is have common spaces. And so I think that's a strategy that's starting to unwind just because of the, just the free Wi-Fi trend.
It needs to happen, because here's what people don't realize. What good is it to have a mansion in the middle of a slum? None. Things only work if everybody has the opportunity to get ahead and to succeed. And one part of that is by having access, it's nice, well and good for you. If you have access, you can afford to pay for it. But, you have to look at the repercussions of if you have it, but nobody else has it. How good is that? It's like having a birthday party and you're the only person that can have ice cream. Everybody else, you're sitting there, but you're not enjoying it because nobody else can have it either, So
yeah,
weird analogy, but that's what I wanted, ice cream. So, anyway.
So I can't hear you.
Oh yeah.
That's a good analogy. Good analogy. I like that one. You know what? And Bobby is saying, bring back net zero 5G.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. What happened to it was the big ISPs. That's what happened to it. At the very beginning of the commercial internet age, as I said, yeah, you did have the net zeros. You did have these free, these couple of free services, because I used to use them. I had AOL, but I used to use net zero and all of these things. But these big ISPs, and this is another thing, we get caught up on the faster is better, the bigger is better. So when free, after a while, there's only so much that free can do. Notice there hasn't been any free DSL or anything for us, right? So the faster that things get, the more technology develops, the harder it is for things to remain free without very heavy subsidy. So I think that's kind of what helped to phase them out, which is unfortunate.
Like you say, they need new devices. I have an old Mac here. It's awesome. It still runs great, but it doesn't get any more updates. So essentially, I have to buy another $2,000 computer to keep up with, if I wanted a computer on the same level now, that's how much it would cost. That's not how much it cost when I bought it. But, it's like to keep up, like you said, with the speed of the internet. Now they got 4K and, 1080p and all this stuff, right? Which if you have an old computer, ain't going to be able to stream none of that. you know. So it's just like to keep up, you gotta pay, you know. So that's definitely an issue.
Exactly.
It sounds like hostage. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah,
like hostage.
You're definitely held hostage. But remember, I said I refuse to be held hostage. I'm not getting another iPad because I had the same problem. I don't know if you heard, Will, that I have an iPad 2, which is no longer updatable. It just has to stay. And guess what? It's just going to stay on operating system 9 point whatever because I'm not buying another one.
Yeah, I got an old one too.
Exactly. So it's like, you know, the other day I posted an article about, you know, before you sell your iPad or whatever, the ways that you could repurpose it, for example, as you know, a bigger remote and things like that. So there are things you could do with it, but for its intended purpose, it's very soon you're not going to be able to do a whole lot with it. So the fact that you can even access apps and the internet now, you know, for me, it's very amazing. But soon that won't be the case, and this is a problem. Modern technology is great, and I love technology, but in it, people are always left behind the better we get. And as I just kept saying, I keep saying this, that the more we close the gap, the farther it opens when we add new technology or faster speeds. And that's not saying don't do that. Absolutely. But I think what we need to do is implement a plan to bring everybody with us, or at least the people who want to come with us. We can't help everybody if you don't want help. But we need to implement a plan that will allow those who want to be on board to come with us, because that's the problem now. There's never a plan. It just happens. And then we wonder why there are people that are falling behind the curve. How embarrassing is it that you live in a country that is one of the richest in the world and you have people that can't get onto the internet? What kind of nonsense is that? Actually, the U.S. should be ashamed.
And there are programs that are helping like third world countries get computers that I saw them online. I'm like, why don't they do this in America, where you can get like they make real cheap like laptops, like basically like netbooks, the ones that you see in the store that are basically $100. They give them away in third world countries, or they're like 10 or 20. They're like real cheap, you know. But I think it's just all the economics where they know supply and demand here, where we can afford it, so they're not going to give them away. But the people who are in the lowest income brackets aren't having access to it.
And here's the thing. We can't even afford it. Let's look at how many people actually paid outright for the technology they have, whether it's a phone, these now $2,000 phones that they have. Oh, well, you can buy that on your plan and pay it off over time. So there are so many of us that are actually, we can't afford it. We just get it because it's slick marketing and we think we need it.
That's so true. That almost everybody, like you said, these phones are cars now. I mean, as far as how much they're charging you for, you could buy a car, you know. And these kids walking around with these little iPhones and stuff, and it's just insane at how much they cost, you know. Like you say, it is. Yeah, it's true. Most of us can't afford it.
I also want to look at, and I just want to shout out Bobby saying Elon Musk will save the free web with satellites.
Oh my goodness. You might, I don't know.
Oh dear.
But and for those who don't know, Tachi is a big fan of Tesla.
I am. He's gone a little mad, but I'm still a fan of Tesla. The idea of Tesla.
But I also want to look at the digital divide between generations. There's a divide there too.
And it's starting to bridge because they have to use it. You know, I mean, like my mom, I love her, and she used to call me all the time. How do you do this? How do you do this? And it's so crazy because we grew up with computers, and she used to work at a technology college, but I guess she kind of fell out. So she, or fell off when she retired. So she would ask me how to do the simplest things, like open a folder or find something on her computer that she downloaded. And, you know, I'll talk her through it over and over and over again. It seems like the simplest things. But I don't know. But they, like you said, it has such a great utility that they learn to use certain things. Like she knows how to get her Hobby Lobby coupons. You know what I'm saying? She knows how to pay her electric bill if she isn't able to, you know, get it in the mail soon enough. So, but yeah, there's a lot of classes for seniors and stuff, and but I think that's the key is just simplify it for them to do exactly what they need to do, not try to teach them how to design websites or anything like that, but just do what they're going to use it for.
That's very true. Sorry, go ahead.
No problem. Just want to update here on the YouTube platform. Divide Right says it's crazy. Walmart and McDonald's have free Wi-Fi. It's free, but a bit slow, but free. LOL. Her tablets are almost 3 years old. I can care less if we can't update it after a while because it's paid off for. LOL. Heck, my Wi-Fi spot is 3G. It's paid off. In our neighborhood, the schools are now letting fourth graders and take home Chromebooks, but some of the kids don't have Wi-Fi at home, so it's hard for them to use it. Parents can't afford the net.
Absolutely. You're priced out of success.
Good way of putting it. Good way of putting it.
Yeah, especially looking at this news story about all these rich people paying to get into college, and and we can't even get the internet. It's like,
don't let Kachi go there tonight. Don't.
That is an area you don't want me to go tonight.
Okay.
Let's stay on topic.
Topic. Okay.
Let me interject. Just want to shout out on Periscope. What's up, Shay? What's up, Jay Hood? Thanks for stopping in. And Bobby makes an interesting point. Everything is priced for everyone to fail.
And may I say something? Don't think that I am anti-profit. I am not. I just think that there are ways to do it. I think that making profit and being fair and having everyone succeed, they are not mutually exclusive. Both of them can exist in the same sentence. And I don't know why these non-thinking idiots don't think that they can. Absolutely, I do. I actually do, because they want to maximize profits to the detriment of everyone else. But they can exist in the same sentence, and that's the way we need to start looking at things. That it doesn't have to be one or the other. It can be both, and it needs to be both.
I agree with you so much, Tashi. It's like it's just common sense, right? You got to have two bottom lines, meaning profit and people, because ultimately, that's what business is about. If you really think about it holistically, what do businesses do? You're trying to help somebody, right? You're providing a value, a service. All business, all economics is us basically taking care of our basic needs, which has evolved to, not so basic needs, but right. We're all just providing services for each other, whether it's, a roof over their head or some entertainment, or a new way to listen to music or something. We're trying to help each other. Right. But because money is evolved and people can't connect money with actual people, they don't recognize that, hey, we're just exchanging our efforts, Absolutely. Like it used to be people who made potatoes and somebody who makes cotton. We need to exchange because I can't do everything, So ultimately it is a group effort that business is involved in. The whole economic system is us all trying to help each other. And because like you said, because so many businesses have lost sight of that, we're destroying each other, and that's what's happening to the world. And until we make that connection again, it's not going to work in the long run anyway.
Well, it's interesting, something that So Steph says. I don't believe capitalism and equity can coexist.
That is very interesting. The way we've set it up, no, it can't. The way it is set up currently, it cannot.
So I'm gonna parking lot that comment for another conversation, because I think
that's a big conversation.
That's a big conversation.
Conversation onto itself, and I think that would be a deep conversation. So Steph, when I bring it to the Dr. Vibe platform, I'm going to credit you for that topic, because I think that's an incredible conversation topic right there. That is huge. That is huge. So our digital divide, it's getting wider according to Tachi. What are some solutions?
That's what I like, solutions. So I think there are a number of solutions, and I'm by no means an expert in this, but I think that there are, because the system works in a capitalistic way right now, then we need to employ capitalism to start to solve some of these things. There are definitely, when we talk about, let's say, community schools in urban areas, there are definitely enough people with means that could adopt, for example, just take one school, a group of you take one school, solve the problem there. So again, this is a problem that is constant, because as things get better, there's a need for new technology, but start solving the problem there. At least if you start, then you can work on ways towards sustainability of that. Okay, so that's one thing. Two, I think that governments, local governments, municipalities need to get involved in this. There needs to be, this is part of infrastructure. Every we pay taxes, do we not? Every country works on infrastructure and capital improvement projects. Part of capital improvement and infrastructure is the internet, because you cannot exist without it. Sorry, in this day and age, there are a few fringe people that are off the grid, but for most part, commerce, everything works through the internet, right? And through the web. This should be part of what is put aside. So whether, I don't know how you want to do it, whether you want to have a specific tax for it, etc., but we pay taxes already for this. So that should be something that municipalities are looking at, actually making this part of their capital improvement projects to, where there's lay fiber optic cable, make sure there are centralized places where there are, even internet hotspots. Those are things that could be done as well. Provide internet hotspots, and not just in Chicago, New York, Miami, LA. Look at places like, I don't know, pick some place in the middle of the country. Wichita, Kansas.
Virginia. Virginia could use it, yes.
Okay, Galax, Virginia.
My little town, yeah.
Exactly. Pick some place and start there. I understand it didn't get like this overnight, so it's not going to be solved overnight. But those are just a few things. There's like a lot of different things. And then, you know what? Corporate responsibility. Whole places places like Verizon, they're already starting to do some of these things. Whole places like Verizon and Comcast, it said responsible for doing some things like this in terms of corporate responsibility. You exist in the community, you need to give back to the community.
Tony, what do you want to add?
Well, as much as I love technology and I use it every day, and I'm pretty much adapted into it, I do see a lot of downfalls in technology. I do see a lot of ways that technology has improved my life and improved the way that things are. But the new generation, I'm talking about everyone from 2000 till now, and probably even a little later, earlier than that, probably like 94, 5, something like that. They do not understand how easy they have it. Technically, they do not understand how easy they have it, how easy it is to go to the library, take a library these days. They don't understand the concept of looking up things in a card catalog from a Dewey Decimal System. They don't understand that anymore. Basically because it's all on computer. They just go to the computer and it tells them where to find it, and or whatever. Real books are beginning to be non-existent. Not that there's anything wrong with it. It's kind of saving trees, but kids today don't appreciate holding a real book in their hand anymore. Or even how to find a real book anymore. Hey, just get an ebook version of it. It's killing jobs. Comic book industry. I'd use that for example. Comic books aren't hand drawn anymore. It's all computer printed out. It's all computer printout. There's nothing wrong with having a hand printed, hand drawn comic book these days. You go to Walmart, what do you see? You see automatic waxing machines waxing the floors through an algorithm. That's taking away somebody's job. It is a double-edged sword to say, that the internet's great and wonderful. It is great and wonderful, but is it really too much? To the point, it's like, kids, they don't understand. Look,
well, I think it's evolution. I mean, things are going to change, and there's nothing we can do to stop it. It's always going to transform. Back in the day, people used to build railroads. There's no railroad building jobs. Now you have to learn how to code. You were talking about comic books, and art, and that's why I'm an artist. So I got one of these, right?
Yeah.
So if I want to draw and do stuff like that and share it, printing it on paper is it's not even the cheapest way. I can make more money, doing it digitally and selling digital prints that someone else has to print out. So it's like there's the evolution, and it's going to hurt some people who are tied to the old way of doing things, but it's going to go forward.
Well, it's not a thing. It's not a thing of what I was getting to is being appreciative of where it came from, where the and it was like, today, I know for a fact with my nephews, my brother and I make a point that 2 days out of the week, we don't let them use their devices because we want them to understand how hard it was for us when we were their age. Find it in the library and understanding the system. They're like, okay, yeah, we can appreciate the internet a little bit better now because of the fact of, this makes it pretty simple. And what it all goes down.
Well,
take example what happened yesterday with Instagram and Facebook.
That was awesome. I love that. That was so awesome.
Can I just say I was happy because I was like, "Oh, good, a break." So,
off the treadmill for a couple hours, right?
Yes.
Yeah. As much as I love the internet, and as much as I love technology, and as much as it is, it's just you look at some people and you're like, how stupid are you? You've got all this gifted to you. You don't even appreciate it because you don't even understand where it came from and how easy it made your life.
Mm.
Do you feel also, Tony, that it's causing a divide, the technology revolution?
It will to a point, and what I mean by that is until there will be no more people around that will not get it, there will always be some kind of divide. Does that make sense?
But the thing is too, though, that's only step one. There's a whole thing of people that have it and people that don't have it. Then the people that have it, again, the access. So there's a two-pronged thing there. Having it, but also what type of access are you getting? Because I don't know when it's handling, but all I've been hearing over the last while, technology-wise, is 5G.
Yeah.
And again, that's going to cause another divide because obviously, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tachi, you're going to pay more for it.
It's not free. Anybody who thought it was free is living in a dream world. It's not going to be free. So that, again, as technology gets better, there's the gap gets wider. And so that's why, I say that it gets wider. So we make some headway and it closes a little bit, but then something new comes out and it widens. Here's the bottom line. As long as these industries are so tied to monetary spoils, there will always be a divide.
Mm-hmm. And we, like you said earlier, we need some kind of economic incentive for businesses. And one of them I was thinking when you asked about solutions is the free Wi-Fi thing. I think it's wise if you have a restaurant or somewhere, like Burger King or wherever, to have free Wi-Fi because I know when I didn't have Wi-Fi, I would go to Burger King and order a sausage biscuit or whatever, just so I can sit in there and use their Wi-Fi for an hour or something.
Okay.
You know.
May I add to this? So here's the operative thing. So when we say free, it's really not free, because you really can't go into a business that is in the business of trying to sell you things and get nothing and just you use the internet. Some places may be cool with you doing that, but many will not be cool with you doing that. And so the other end of that is, by offering, okay, if you take the McDonald's and the Burger Kings and stuff, yeah, they try to have some healthy options, but for the most part, no. So what are we then doing health-wise to ourselves when you are then forced and relegated to go to some place that serves fast food in order to use the free internet? So maybe it's free in a sense, but you're paying for it with your health.
Yeah, you're going to pay for it, but I was just saying, as far as, I mean, other businesses doing that, I think it's a good idea for other businesses to do that. So that way, the access starts to get spread out. And like you said, it is it's an incentive for the business, because like you said, you're going to have to pay to be in there anyway. It's like they won't even hardly let you use the bathroom or something. You know what I'm saying? So you need, that's the point. If you're going to have to buy something just to go in there and sit down, whether it's a cup of coffee or a cup of tea or something, because in Boston, that's, they have a lot of coffee shops, and, students and professionals alike will go in there and just get a cup of tea and sit for hours and use it like an office. I mean, I used to do that as well, so it's like, there's that. I mean, that's just one possibility, but I'm thinking,
it's a great one.
What are other ways that businesses can, meet both bottom lines, and actually expand?
Well, I mean, I know one way that might help is there's a lot of nonprofit organizations that focus for disabled people who have disabilities. I'm one of them, but maybe some of the nonprofit organizations can make sure that disabled people who have disabilities, have access to the internet, because sometimes it's a lifeline for them. People who have internet, they can't get out. That's their lifeline. That's the way they communicate to the world, or get a good education because of the internet. They can go to school online instead of going out. It's or just with the families. If you're if you're in a family that has one person with a disability, then they'll ensure that your family has some kind of internet service that is going to be feasible for what you do.
I agree, and if I could just add to this whole conversation, I think the big problem is not only the money thing, but we tend to look at internet connectivity as a privilege as opposed to a right. Just like you have roads that you drive on, I think in this day and age, there's no choice. So this has to be available to everyone. To what degree and to what extent, that's not what I'm here to argue, but it needs to be available to everyone. So the problem is that we're looking at it as a privilege, and it is not a privilege in this day and age, not when we're talking about our school children needing to do assignments online and they can't. So it's not a privilege anymore. This needs to be a right.
Okay, just to catch up on some comments here. Social Steph is saying, I had Fios when I lived in Philly. Life was beautiful. There must be a free network, I guess, that we're talking about there. Cliff says 5G has severely limited distance constraints. So if you are any distance from a transceiver, you get no service at that speed. Social Steph, I've become so addicted to ordering my groceries online for a delivery. Cliff says, so you will have more have-nots than haves in the new high-speed connectivity. This is true. It's just a matter that it is when it comes to this sort of stuff. Also, and Divine Right says, yeah, people went nuts yesterday when Facebook and Instagram acted out, and Periscope was on point. LOL. So, of all time for
That
Periscope.
was that was the only time that Periscope was on point for me.
Yes, exactly. Well, we are going to start winding down the conversation here. Um, Final words, Dr. Tachi.
Yes, I think that even though it seems like there's a bleak picture, just the term divide itself connotates some sort of negativity. But I think there is a way to achieve this where connectivity is not a privilege, where it is something everyone is afforded, but we have to believe in it and work towards it. At this point, I don't see any way that it is not going to be tied to some monetary gain. It started off that way, and unfortunately, this was not fulfilling Tim Berners-Lee's, the founder of the World Wide Web. It's not fulfilling his dream, but he and other people are working towards making the dream closer to what they envisioned initially, which was a free and open system for people to get information from. And information is a right. The right to information is big. So part of that right to information is access to the internet. So I'm urging, people, those of us that are woke and learned, to try and look at doing something about this, about the connectivity, so that the divide, even if there are points where it gaps, where we can quickly catch up.
See, we'll jump back in. So obviously, you have something.
Yeah, just the original point where there's so many economic opportunities on the internet, and I think it's a great place for us to take advantage of it. The ones of us that are on here, I mean, obviously everyone here is on it. And so if you have an idea, a dream, a voice, a art, or something, it's a great opportunity to share. And I believe when you start participating in it more, you will take action to make other people available to other people. For instance, if I share something, I might call my cousin or say, "Did you see that?" And so he'll get on it and try to see it. And so it's like it creates a motivation, for us to actually start to bridge this gap, especially for people who don't have access. We're like, okay, how can I reach those people? You're a musician, you're trying to get on SoundCloud. And you're inner city rapper or whatever. You need the people to get on SoundCloud, so you're gonna want to be motivated to get people on SoundCloud. However, you go tell them to go get the free phone or go down to the library and download this or whatever you try to tell them to do.
Right.
So I just wanted to share that it's an opportunity for everyone. For us to be able to share this awesome show, Dr. Vibe got. It just creates a platform. And and that we should take advantage of it.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Good stuff. Tony, any last words?
Well, I agree with Will and agree with Tashi. As far as what Will said, yes, it is it is changing the whole prospect of the entertainment industry and also the learning industry. I know for a fact that with what I work with, hobby-wise, what I work with is, I work with a lot of independent movie makers and people who make web series, entertainment stuff. It's changed the world of Hollywood the way it is today. It does change, the music industry as well, both good and bad, because you have a lot of illegal activities on both ends. But it should be, the internet should be available for everyone, and either through a free service, through help of the government or a nonprofit organization or something, or a maybe as a town, city, like, hey, if you want to use our internet, pay an extra tax. Or just something, but it should be available for everyone. That's pretty much all I have to say.
Okay. I will add some final comments. I think one of the things I get concerned about with the world of digital is it marries so much what happened with traditional media, and that's a concern. That there was a phrase a number of years ago when convergence. That's what I'm looking for. Convergence. And it seems that there was convergence in the old days of media, and it looks like it's happening again in traditional digital media. And again, it's leaving a lot of people out. And we didn't even really get to talk about the ownership end of how ownership of digital media is affecting the digital divide also, because you have these large conglomerates that own the distribution of content. That's, I always say, the distribution of content is one of the key pieces when it comes to the digital divide. You know, again, that led to net neutrality in the United States. We don't have it here in Canada for now. Hopefully it will not come, but companies, you know that companies around the world are looking at the US as an example, good or bad, and say, hey, that's happening there, done. The web, and Bobby's saying the web should be available to all devices. Well, you know, at the end of the day, it's a scalability thing too, because if more people use it and you put it at a good price, you're making money. You're making money, right? You make it reasonable. Yes, it's the investment that's needed is, to me, an investment. It's not an expense, because people who can't access it right now, you are potentially holding back great ideas, great innovation, great personal development. Would you want that left on your heart, saying, no, we didn't do it and we stopped the growth, potential growth of a next incredible individual or next incredible invention? So we know it can be done. And again, Tachi made a good point that if you want the change to happen, where to start is at the local level. The local level is very, 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 very good. So it's priced out, but we got, you know, there's people power. Let's make it happen. I will let Tachi give her contact information before we close out.
If anybody wants to contact me, as Dr. Vibe always urges me to say, you can reach me on a number of different platforms. I am the host of Mediascope every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time on Periscope and Facebook Live. I do a pre-show at 5 on Instagram Live. So you can reach me on IG at Dr._Tachi. So that's Dr_TACHI. On Periscope/Twitter, I am at Tachiada, TACHIADA. That's both Periscope and Twitter. And if you want to watch Mediascope on Facebook, go to at Mediascope16. So that's Mediascope 16. I'm also one half of the TV Twins. I have a podcast called TV Channeling with my friend Kevin, where we talk all about the latest in TV, film, and entertainment news. We also do TV reviews, and that you can hear on Tuesdays on WJMSradio.com. And you can also listen to us on every major podcasting platform, including TVChanneling.com. And again, both shows are on WJMSradio.com. So 5 p.m. Eastern Time on Tuesdays for TV Channeling, and Mediascope is 6 p.m. Eastern Time on WJMS Radio. So that's it.
Yeah,
I got it all in.
She got it all in. She got it all in. Yeah, I am Dr. Vibe, your host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe Show, the home of epic conversations and the place for epic conversations. If you want to watch replays like this, you can do it on the Get Vocal platform. You can also watch it on, I'll get confused, YouTube, just by putting in the search engine, the space, DR space, VIBE space, SHOW. You can listen to replays of my epic audio conversations at Apple Podcast, Stitcher Radio, TuneIn Radio, Google Play Music, iHeartRadio. Selected audio replays are also available at thegoodmenproject.com, WJMS Radio out of New York City, which was already mentioned, and Mile High Radio out of Denver, Colorado. I'm also a certified empowerment coach. If you'd like to get a complimentary session with me, you can email me, dr.vibe at the VIBESHOW.com. You can follow me on Twitter at DRVIBESHOW, or go to my website, the DRVIBESHOW, where you can also listen to and watch conversations. Go to the top, click on Contact the Dr. Vibe Show, and you can email me or send me an audio message right from my website. Brand ambassador for the only online magazine dedicated to African Americans. Name of the magazine is Cuisine Noir Magazine. Website is cuisinenoirmag.com. If you would like to get some empowerment coaching, I'm a certified empowerment coach. Operate my own service called no, I said that already. I'm getting confused. I also operate a service called Getting Media Coverage, where I help businesses and entrepreneurs get media promotion so they can elevate their business, product, or service. Ending off with these 4 things. Live your life as a dream. If you can dream it, you can make it. Next up, sometimes you have to get small to get stronger. Also, block assumptions and then aim bigger, aim better, aim higher, aim wider. The next time I will be on Get Vocal will be Monday evening. I will be hosting a conversation for the organization called Men and Masculinity. And the topic or the top of the conversation is, how are men handling Me Too?
Hot topic.
So that is, I heard both gentlemen on the call, on the live went, So I feel like we hit a good topic with that one. And I'll be hosting a number of conversations for that organization over the next few months. But that's going to be our kickoff conversation. I'll have Lee Rosen, the program lead for an organization called Men and Masculinity, on the Epic Conversation. So we look forward to seeing you then. Catch all the replays you can and reach out to me if you have any questions, concerns, or you want to throw something at me. I will duck. God bless. Peace be all. Keep the faith. And thanks again, Dr. Tachi, for another epic conversation. Oh, want to thank Bobby, Lokesh, Cliff, Melvin, Dante, Herbie. There were other. Elephant Room was in the house. So Steph was in the house. Who else? I'm just trying to catch. Of course, C. Will and Tony. Thank you so much. I said Melvin. Dre was in the house also. And on the Periscope end, it was Shay and also Joint Specialists were in the house also. So if I forgot you, it's because of my head, not my heart. God bless, peace and well, keep the faith, and walk good. Good night, everybody.